It may be said, and my soul has long been a tenement for specters, not the gibbering shades of the departed, but the more persistent phantoms of forgotten ideas, of moribund memories, and of art that has fallen into decay. I, Alistair Finch, the last of my line, dwell in the crumbling edifice of my ancestors, a mansion whose stone walls have drunk too deeply of winter and of sorrow to be rightly called a home. Its chambers are libraries for tomes no man reads, its corridors galleries for portraits whose visages have dissolved behind a craquelure of oil and time. And I, the sole custodian of this desolation, have found my only solace in the acquisition of the detritus of a past left behind, waxen cylinders, nitrate films, and, the subject of this most ghastly narrative, the magnetic ribbons of a bygone age. It was upon a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, during that most doleful of months, November, that the artifact came into my possession. It arrived in a parcel, bearing no return address, swathed in sallow brown paper and bound with a length of perished twine. Within, nestled in a bed of yellowed newsprint dated 1988, lay a single VHS cassette. It bore no label, no mark of identification, save for a scrawled, unsteady hand in faded ink upon its spine. WKHVS TV 13, Havenwood. Final broadcast. Havenwood. The name conjured a sense of placid falsehood, a ghastly irony whose full venomous meaning I was only later to comprehend. I consulted my old maps and almanacs, yet could find no record of a town or county of that name. It seemed like the tape itself, a thing born of a vacuum, a fragment of some excised reality. With a tremor I attributed to the ague of the house, I introduced the cassette into the VCR, a relic of its era I had preserved for just such a purpose. The machine groaned in protest before consuming the foreign object. I settled into my cracked leather armchair, the only light in the chamber being the ghastly phantasmal blue that now bled from the cathode ray tube. After a maelstrom of electric snow, a veil concealing some dreadful stage, the image resolved. The quality was execrable, the colors washed out and the edges blurred by magnetic decay. A local station's logo appeared, a stark triangle containing the letters WKHV with the ominous number 13 beneath. The scene then cut to a newsroom. A man of perhaps 50 years with salt and pepper hair meticulously combed and a smile of practiced yet strained professionalism sat behind the news desk. A small placard identified him as Silas Croft. "Good evening and welcome to the Channel 13 Evening News," he began, his voice a study in practiced confidence. But his eyes darted for the briefest of moments off camera, as if seeking reassurance from some unseen quarter. He proceeded with the insipid litany of local affairs, a town council meeting, a petty larceny at the general store, a heartwarming tale of a cat rescued from a tree. All was alarmingly normal. And yet I, whose senses were preternaturally attuned to the outre, felt a subterranean tension. There was a low, almost sub-audible thrum beneath the audio. At times, the image would shudder, and for a thousandth part of a second, the smile of Silas Croft would collapse, revealing a mask of utter, unspeakable terror before his professional visage snapped back into place. "And now," Silas said, swallowing with a visible effort, "we turn to Arthur for the weather." "Arthur?" The camera panned to a gaunt, spectral man standing before a green weather map. Arthur Pym, a name whose calamitous literary echo sent a chill through me. Miss Arthur possessed an ill-concealed panic. His eyes were wide and wet, his hair disheveled, his necktie askew. He clutched a weather pointer with bloodless knuckles. "Thank you, Silas," Arthur whispered, his voice a hoarse, tremulous thing. He looked not at the camera, but through it, as if into some abyss, visible only to him.
Tonight the weather will be changing. He drew a ragged breath. The patterns we are seeing, he said, his voice gaining a sudden feverish urgency, they are not patterns we are familiar with. The high and low pressure systems, they no longer obey the laws. He turned and gestured to the map, but upon it were no familiar H's and L's, no isobars or weather fronts. It was instead a canvas of blasphemous sigils, of spiraling vortices and angular glyphs that seemed to pulse and writhe upon the screen. Where the sun should be, there was a black spiral like a blind, staring eye. My advice to you tonight, he said, at last looking directly into the lens, his eyes two pits of despair. My advice is a warning. Do not look at the sky after sundown. The stars are wrong. The moon is a lie. Silas Croft, off camera, could be heard hissing with fury, "Arthur, for God's sake, cut him off!" But Arthur could not be stopped. "And the faces!" he shrieked, now tears now carving paths down his cheeks. "Dear God, the faces! Do not trust the faces you see at your window. They imitate so well, but the eyes, their eyes are always wrong." He lunged toward the camera. "They are not..." Bzzz. The screen erupted in a blizzard of static. And then there was only blackness.
I sat immobile in the dark, the silence of the room now more profound, more pregnant with menace than any sound. My heart hammered against my ribs like a caged bird. What had I witnessed? An elaborate hoax? Or was it something else? Something real, something terrible, and something undeniably, horribly true. The chill in the room seemed to have deepened, to have pierced my very marrow. I felt watched. My gaze drifted to the great window where heavy velvet curtains concealed the night. Arthur Pym's warning echoed in my mind. Sleep did not visit me that night. Every creak of the old house, every moan of the wind in the chimney took on a new and sinister meaning. I found myself listening to the familial groans of my home with a new species of dread, analyzing them for any hint of imperfect imitation. In the days that followed, I was consumed. I watched the tape again and again and again, each viewing revealing some new and unsettling detail. My reason, that faculty upon which I had so prided myself, began to suffer fissures. I commenced my research. With a fanatical devotion I had previously reserved only for medieval manuscripts, I scoured digital archives, microfiche databases, every resource I could command. I searched for Havenwood, for WKHV-TV, for Silas Croft and Arthur Pym. The result was a perfect, unassailable void. No record of a Havenwood existed in any state. No FCC license had ever been granted to a station with the call letters WKHV. It was as if the town, the station, and all its inhabitants had never been, or, and this thought crept into my mind with a horror far greater, they had been, and had been so perfectly excised from the fabric of reality that not a trace remained, save for this final, desperate warning.
My self-imposed isolation in this ancient mansion ceased to be a matter of choice. It became a dire necessity. The world outside became a source of nameless horror. I ceased to answer the telephone, the caller's voice on the other end sounding alien and mechanical. I refused the postman at the door, his face seen through the peephole, seeming too symmetrical, too perfect. The decay of the world without seemed to mirror the decay within. The dust in my house seemed to thicken. The cobwebs, I could swear, wove themselves into patterns that mimics the sigils from Arthur's map. At times, catching my reflection in one of the tarnished mirrors, I fancied it smiled at me a fraction of a second after I did. Its eyes. Something was amiss with the eyes.
Tonight, a storm rages without. Not a storm of wind and rain, but a storm of preternatural silence. The low thrum has returned. It emanates from the very walls of the house. A soft knock has just sounded at the front door. Tap, tap, tap. Alistair? A familiar voice calls. The voice of my mother. My dear, are you in there? I've been so worried. My mother has been 15 years in her grave. I recoil from the door, my heart seizing in a fist of ice. I have scrambled to this desk, and in a paroxysm of terror, I have taken up this pen and this paper to set down this final confession. The knocking grows louder, more insistent. Open the door, Alistair. It is so very cold out here. The voice is still my mother's, but there is something wrong, a flaw in the cadence, an imperfect imitation. There is the sound of splintering wood. A darkness is seeping from beneath the door, a corporeal emptiness. I must end this. I can see a face taking shape in that darkness, a face I know better than any other, my own face. But the eyes, dear God, the eyes are all wrong.